So Wolfram has this fantastic idea of, computational equivalence. That the idea is that the natural world stumbles upon computers quite often. That the idea of a universal machine, right, that Turing established, which is a machine that can simulate any other machine. It's a machine that runs software. And in that software programming, you can get this universal machine to simulate the behavior of any other machine. And in the early days of computing, it seems like computers were very delicate human artifacts that took a lot of engineering work to put together. But what Wolfram showed with his cellular automata research is that it's relatively easy to stumble upon a system that's complex enough to support universal computation. That he has this breakdown of sort of 4 different classes of, he uses automata as the case study. But he argues that any system that's not obviously simple, any system that's sort of interesting in its dynamics, the majority of the time that's going to support universal computation. So in other words, that there's these natural computers all throughout nature. And previously we didn't recognize them or understand them as computational objects. I think that's what's just so interesting about this new era of maybe what we might call philosophy, is that we have this new language. We can invoke the metaphor of a computer and software and program and universality, where, as we spoke last time, the best minds on the planet didn't have access to those thinking tools. And so if that's really true, that there's these computer-like objects all over the place, and now we have computer-like objects that might be instantiating consciousness, namely a GPU running a large language model, which obviously would be highly debated whether or not that's conscious or not. But if we take that in the abstract sense and extrapolate that out a decade or so, to me, it's clear that we will have a hard time, or it might be fruitless to argue whether they are or not, because they'll be so similar to the kinds of things that we see in humans, that maybe they're actually all throughout nature. Maybe throughout the universe, we should expect to find objects that are universal machines, sort of spontaneous in nature. And we want to think about now what's the chance, essentially, that they have a software program that might be somewhere on this ladder of consciousness that's attributed to Leibniz.
Are you referring to computational equivalence?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so in the Leibniz case, you were referencing representations of representations, and you have a hierarchy.
Right.
In the Wolfram case, it sounds like you have what is not a computer, and then what exhibits computer-like qualities, and then you hit universal computer.
Right.
But there's nothing above that.
Exactly, and that's kind of the point, is that you smash into this sort of upper ceiling of computation relatively quickly, right? It's sort of a low speed limit, and you whatever vehicle you're in quickly hits that speed limit, because that's what's so profound about universality, is that's the ceiling. There's nothing more powerful than that, and so if that is relatively easy to create spontaneously, in some sense, by chance, we get a computer-like object, a universal machine, then we want to think about, well, what's the analogous part is the software that would go with it, right? So Wolfram suggests that it's relatively easy to find computers in the wild. Well, what's the chance they have any interesting programming to go with that?
So is there a similar ceiling with representations? Like, is it the case that once you hit the 4th representation, you've hit them all? And is there a universal representation at level 6?
So I think you hit the nail on the head with that one, because that's really kind of what I've been thinking about. I like how you phrase it. Are humans already at that universality? Our intellectual sphere, our language, our culture, have we maxed out? Or are we going to transcend this era, reach another level of consciousness, maybe called spirituality, whatever that might be, another layer of evolution? Or is this it? Right? That we have the ability to represent our representations, and we can think about our thinking, and then we can think about that, and so on. And I don't know, right? I would like to hope that we're not at that universal level yet. I think we mentioned last time on the channel this sort of path from ape to angel, right? Or on this from rocks to light, kind of thing. Where are we on that sort of evolutionary trend, in a sense? And I think that we're not at the angel stage, right? We're not quite there yet. And so it reminds me of a quote. I think they said I forget who says it. We'll have to look it up. We're angels with assholes, right? That we're still these corporeal beings that eat sandwiches and have to go through our daily lives. We're not this ephemeral being that's just pure thought and energy and things. But it seems like the AI is on that trajectory. And I wonder if maybe there's just a discontinuity, and as others have suggested, maybe the biological sphere just bootstraps the AI, and then that's the next stage of evolution. Because, for lack of a better term, they don't have assholes.
Is the question of have we hit the upper limit equivalent to the question of are there thoughts that we can't think of? So now what I mean by equivalent to is we can imagine that let's look at this room and there are thoughts everywhere and we have access to them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Then there are thoughts that are outside this room. We don't have access to them. Mm-hmm. And then we'd say, okay, we have not hit the upper ceiling.
Right.
And then we can say that, okay, so in that case it was, if there exists a thought that's outside this room, then we have not hit the upper ceiling. We can also say, if we have not hit the upper ceiling, it implies there is a thought that's outside this room. So I'm not sure if that's the case, because then you would make an equivalence between those two.
Right. Well, I do think it's the case there's unthinkable thoughts. And the question is, are we able to think about them in the abstract sense? Maybe not the actual thought, but do we really understand or can we even appreciate that there's things outside of our conceptual and perceptual window? And that's what I've been thinking about a lot recently, or trying to. And, we mentioned last time Richard Hamming, and he talks about this idea. He says there's smells that dogs can smell that we can't smell, and they can hear things we can't hear. And there's lots of things in the animal kingdom that have a larger perceptual window. And he argues, why should we think that there's thoughts we can't think?
Right, it seems quite clear. And also, even just arithmetically, there are numbers that we can never conceive of. At least we can write them down, like Graham's number, but we can say Graham's number to the power of Graham's number. We can't actually conceive of it. We actually don't understand what it means for a number to be greater than 150 or so.
Right. We can't fit these things into our mind. We can kind of only approximate them.
So to someone listening, they're like, well, what are you talking about? It's quite clear. The philosophical term, I believe, is Umwelt. Mm-hmm. It's quite clear our Umwelt is bounded and has some overlap with other animals. I mean, that's not quite clear, but it's not obvious. Okay, so then they're thinking, okay, so what's so profound about this?
Mm-hmm. Well, so thinking about these sort of unthinkable thoughts has led me in a few interesting directions. Why can we not get to that space, right? I think I mentioned last time the future's not what we think it is. Because if we knew exactly which direction to go, we could just go in that direction. And so there's some kind of barrier. And the question is this like a natural barrier? We just don't have enough neurons. We don't have enough cortical layers to represent the representations and so on. And then there could just be another hierarchy. Or something I've been thinking about more recently is that there's a more practical reason why we can't think these thoughts. And it's kind of a sort of an immune system that we mentioned before. That our mind itself is trying to protect us from a variety of thought patterns that would essentially destabilize both our mental patterns and then ultimately our physical self if the thoughts go into a terrible spiral. So from an evolutionary point of view, there might be this kind of filter, this barrier that evolution has instantiated to prevent us from going nutty, essentially. And that if, from a Darwinian evolution perspective, if we just want to kind of populate the planet the best we can, you don't need this kind of intelligence, right? Intelligence could be kind of a Fermi-style filter that's actually preventing a lot of progress. If we think about the reign the dinosaurs had on the planet, it was 100 million years, 200 million years. And humans haven't had that kind of longevity on the planet yet. And it's hard to imagine us continuing the way we're doing for that much time. But you imagine like whales and dolphins, you could easily imagine them doing the same thing they're doing for millions of years into the future and being happy to do it. But this also, leads me to think about like what thoughts our language supports. And I used to think that English was good enough. But now I'm not so sure. And I think what's really interesting is we've taught these language models, not just English, but all of the human languages that we could get our hands on. And I think something that's particularly relevant is the computer languages and the mathematical languages that we've also put into that system. So it has representations that it can map into English, but its mind, so to speak, doesn't really operate in English. It operates in these thought vectors, these word vectors that are independent of any particular language.
Just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Hey, I see you inching away. Don't be like The Economy. Instead, read The Economist. I thought all The Economist was something that CEOs read to stay up to date on world trends. And that's true, but that's not only true. What I found more than useful for myself personally is their coverage of math, physics, philosophy, and AI, especially how something is perceived by other countries and how it may impact markets. For instance, The Economist had an interview with some of the people behind DeepSeek the week DeepSeek was launched. No one else had that. Another example is The Economist has this fantastic article on the recent dark energy data, which surpasses even Scientific American's coverage, in my opinion. They also have the chart of everything. It's like the chart version of this channel. It's something which is a pleasure to scroll through and learn from. Links to all of these will be in the description, of course. Now, The Economist's commitment to rigorous journalism means that you get a clear picture of the world's most significant developments. I am personally interested in the more scientific ones, like this one on extending life via mitochondrial transplants, which creates actually a new field of medicine, something that would make Michael Levin proud. The Economist also covers culture, finance and economics, business, international affairs, Britain, Europe, the Middle East, Africa, China, Asia, the Americas, and of course, the USA. Whether it's the latest in scientific innovation or the shifting landscape of global politics, The Economist provides comprehensive coverage, and it goes far beyond just headlines. Look, if you're passionate about expanding your knowledge and gaining a new understanding, a deeper one, of the forces that shape our world, then I highly recommend subscribing to The Economist. I subscribe to them, and it's an investment into your intellectual growth. It's one that you won't regret. As a listener of this podcast, you'll get a special 20% off discount. Now you can enjoy The Economist and all it has to offer for less. Head over to their website, www.economist.com/toe, TOE, to get started. Thanks for tuning in, and now let's get back to the exploration of the mysteries of our universe. Again, that's economist.com/toe.